Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are cracking open something absolutely foundational for anyone who wants to harness the mystical energies of the Dungeons and Dragons world.
Oh, yeah.
We've got the updated 2024 D&D rulebook right here, specifically digging into Chapter 7, Spells.
That's right. This chapter is, well, it's essentially the instruction manual for weaving magic, whether you're just starting to learn the ropes or you're a seasoned archmage. It lays out all the core rules.
The real basics that govern how magic works in the game.
Exactly.
And our mission today is simple, but, crucial.
Is.
We're going to take you on a guided tour through these pages. We're breaking down exactly how magic works, spellcasting fundamentals.
And pulling out all the essential nuggets directly from this chapter text, just what's in the book.
Yep, no outside info, just what's written here.
The goal is to make sure you, our listener, especially those watching over on the Dragons and Disasters YouTube channel, walk away with a really solid grasp of how spellcasting functions.
Right, so you can understand these mechanics and get your character slinging spells with confidence.
We hope so. This deep dive is tailored just for you folks.
Okay, let's unpack this rulebook then. We've got a full stack of pages here just dedicated to spells, and it's a huge part of the D&D experience.
Definitely. Let's dive in. The journey into magic, interestingly, begins before the adventuring day even starts, really. It starts with how spellcasters gain and prepare their spells.
All right, so before you can even think about unleashing, arcane power, you need to actually have the spell ready to go. The book tells us explicitly that before you can cast a spell, you must either have it prepared, which is, the common method for many spellcasting classes, or
you need access through a magic item, like a wand or maybe a spell scroll someone found.
Right. And the origin of your access to spells is always defined by your source material. Usually your class features, right?
Typically, yeah. If you're a wizard, your spellcasting feature grants you access to the wizard's spell list. Cleric gets the cleric list, and so on.
But magic items can totally bypass this.
Oh, absolutely. They can grant you the ability to cast spells you wouldn't normally know or have prepared. It's a key part of finding loot.
Okay. Now let's talk about the preparation process itself, which is super key for many classes.
It really is.
If your character has a spellcasting feature from their class that requires preparation, this is how it works after you finish a long rest.
That good night's sleep or trance or whatever.
Right. You get to prepare a limited number of spells from your class's spell list.
Think of a long rest as a chance for your character to maybe refresh their mental connection to magic or commune with their deity, study their spell book. It depends on the class flavor.
Yeah, the flavor text varies, but the mechanic is about refreshing. This lets them swap out or select which specific spells are ready in their mind or spirit for the day ahead.
And the core idea here, which is important, is that this prepared list isn't set in stone from one day to the next.
Right. While many players might keep their go-to spells prepared all the time.
Sure, your bread and butter spells.
Exactly. The rulebook details how often and how many spells you can actually change. And this varies significantly depending on your class.
Hugely. The source provides a really clear preparation by class table that outlines these differences. It's super informative.
This table is incredibly telling, actually, about the distinct flavors of magic users in D&D. Let's walk through it, because it highlights a fundamental difference in how these classes approach their magical toolkit.
Sounds good. So for Bard, Cleric, Druid, Paladin, and Ranger, that's a big group. The table lists that you can change any spell you have prepared.
Yeah.
You can change one spell.
Just one.
Just one. And this change happens when you finish a long rest.
Okay, so for this large group of spellcasters, you get basically one flex slot per day, assuming you take a long rest. You can swap out one prepared spell for another from your class list?
Exactly. It gives them a little bit of daily adaptability. Maybe swap a utility spell they didn't use yesterday for something they think they'll need today,
Makes sense. A little tweak for the day's plan.
That small daily adjustment is the norm for many casters. But then you see the big distinction for sorcerers and warlocks.
Yeah, these guys are different.
Their table entry says change any for the type of spell change, but the number of spells is also one, just like the others.
Okay, still one.
But the critical difference is the trigger. Gain a level.
Whoa, okay, that's huge EE, not finish a long rest.
Here.
So here's where it gets really interesting and strategically distinct. That means sorcerers and warlocks do not get to swap out a prepared spell every morning.
Correct. Their spell selection is much more tied to their fundamental advancement in power. They only get the opportunity to change out one spell from their known spells when they level up.
Man, that drastically changes their strategic mindset when choosing spells. They have to pick spells that are going to be useful long term.
Absolutely. Sorcerers, whose magic comes from within, or warlocks tied to their packs, they're less adaptable day to day. They have to make their limited spell selections really count.
So when they level up, that single spell swap is a really significant moment. They might replace an old favorite or grab something crucial they missed before.
Yeah, it makes consistency in choosing broadly applicable spells key for them, because they can't tailor their list daily like, say, a cleric or druid.
That's a major trade-off. They get their magic in different ways, often with unique features like meta magic or pact magic.
Right, different mechanics we might touch on.
But their spell preparation or, the lack of daily prep is a defining limitation. They have the least daily flexibility in their spell list.
It forces a different kind of mastery, I think. Knowing your core spells intimately and relying on their inherent power rather than constant swapping.
Makes sense. And then we get to the wizard.
Ah, the classic.
The table for wizard is the real standout here. It says change any for the type of spell change.
Okay.
But the number of spells says any, and the trigger is finish a long rest.
And that is the game changer.
Yeah.
This is the classic image of the bookish wizard poring over their tome every morning.
Right. So if you're a wizard, provided you have the spell written in your spellbook and enough gold and time to scribe it.
Yeah, the spellbook limitation's still there.
You can essentially re-prepare your entire list of spells for the day from scratch after every long rest.
It's incredible versatility. While the sorcerer and warlock change one spell upon leveling up, and most others change one spell per day, the wizard can completely alter their magical focus.
Based on what they learned yesterday, or what they expect to face today, heading into a dungeon full of undead, prep all the anti-undead stuff, expecting social encounters, swap to enchantment and illusion.
Exactly. It makes the wizard incredibly adaptable, limited mainly by what's in their spellbook and their character level, of course. This mechanic fundamentally shapes their strategic role compared to other casters.
The rulebook does mention, though, that in practice, most spellcasters might not change their prepared lists that often.
Right. You find your favorites, your workhorses.
Yeah, especially if they have a set of spells they rely on consistently. But the potential is there, and the DM is explicitly free to alter how often or under what circumstances prepared lists can be changed, if it suits the campaign.
Good point. The DM always has that flexibility to tailor the experience. Now, there's one more detail about gaining spells. Always prepared spells.
Ah, yes. Sometimes you get spells that are just always there.
Pretty much. Certain class features or subclass abilities grant specific spells that are considered always prepared for you.
And the important mechanical benefit here, the book says, is that these spells do not count against the limited number of spells you can normally prepare each day.
Right. So they're just bonus spells, essentially.
That's a really nice perk. It means these spells are just available to you without needing to use up one of your precious daily preparation slots.
It's often how subclasses add thematic or crucial spells to a character's repertoire without forcing tough choices in their daily preparation. They're just there, ready to go.
Okay, before we dive into the nitty-gritty of spell descriptions, there's a quick but important rule about armor and casting.
Ah, yes, casting and armor. The source states it clearly. You must have proficiency with any armor you are wearing in order to cast spells while wearing it.
Proficiency. Got it. And if you don't have that proficiency, what happens if a wizard tries to wear plate mail?
Well, the rulebook states you are otherwise hampered for spellcasting if you wear armor you're not proficient with.
Hampered. Okay.
While this specific chapter doesn't detail exactly how you're hampered, that's usually in the general rules about armor proficiency, like disadvantage on checks or inability to cast spells altogether.
Yeah.
The critical takeaway here is proficiency is non-negotiable if you want to cast spells effectively while suited up.
Got it. So if your character isn't trained to wear that heavy plate armor, trying to cast Fireball in it is going to be, problematic, even if you can physically wear the armor.
Right. It emphasizes the training and discipline required for spellcasting, even amidst the clatter of armor. Always check your proficiencies if you plan on blending magic and metal.
Prudent advice. Okay, with preparation and basic requirements covered, let's move on to the actual process of casting spells. The rulebook tells us that each spell description has a series of standard entries detailing how to cast it and what it does.
Yeah, we're going to break these down one by one. First, entry you'll usually see is spell level.
Okay, what does that signify? Power level.
Yeah, essentially, yes. Spell levels are basically a power scale ranging from 0 to 9. A level 1 spell is an entry-level magical effect, while a level 9 spell is, incredibly potent, reality-altering stuff.
And cantrips are level 0.
Correct. Cantrips, as we mentioned, are a special case. They're designated as level 0 spells.
Ah, cantrips. The workhorses of the spellcasting world, right?
Indeed. They're fundamental spells that a spellcaster has mastered to the point where they require minimal effort, almost like a trained physical skill you can do repeatedly.
And that brings us to how you power the spells of level 1 and higher, right? They aren't free like cantrips.
Precisely. That's where spell slots come in. Spellcasting is taxing on a caster's magical reserves. To cast a spell of level 1 or higher, you must expend a spell slot.
Oh, okay.
The rulebook describes spell slots as a spellcaster's limited magical potential or energy pool for the day.
So you have a certain number of these slots, and casting a spell uses one up, basically depleting that potential temporarily.
Correct. Your spellcasting class determines how many spell slots you have access to and at what spell levels. The rulebook gives a helpful example. A level 3 wizard might have 4 level 1 spell slots and 2 level 2 spell slots.
Right.
If that wizard decides to cast Magic Missile, which is a level 1 spell, they must expend one of their available level 1 slots.
Leaving them with 3 level 1 slots remaining until they get them back. It's a direct resource management system.
Exactly. And just like preparing spells, those expended spell slots are restored when you finish a long rest.
Ah, the long rest again. Super crucial.
Yep, it's the big reset button for spellcasters. Replenishes both prepared spells, for many, and their spell slots.
Okay, so you use a spell slot of the spell's level or higher. What's the strategic advantage of using a higher level slot than the spell's normal level? Why would you do that?
This is a core way many spells remain relevant as you level up. It's often called upcasting.
Upcasting, okay.
The rulebook states that if a spell is cast using a spell slot that is higher than the spell's normal level, the spell will often have an increased effect. And this enhanced effect is always detailed within the spell's description itself. You have to read the spell text.
So going back to our level 3 wizard casting Magic Missile, it's normally a level 1 spell, but they have level 2 slots. If they choose to use one of their level 2 slots instead of a level 1 slot to cast Magic Missile.
The description for Magic Missile clearly states that when cast using a spell slot of level 2 or higher, it creates one additional dart for each spell slot level above first.
Oh, okay.
So casting it with a level 2 slot would add 1 extra dart, increasing the potential damage. Using a level 3 slot would add 2 extra darts.
So it's not just casting the same spell with more, raw power. The spell's effects are specifically designed to scale up. A spell might deal more damage, affect more targets, last longer.
Or have some entirely new effect, yeah. It's all in the spells at higher levels section, usually. It's a tactical choice you make.
Yeah.
Do you use a high-level slot for a powerful high-level spell, or do you upcast a lower-level spell to get a boosted effect, maybe hitting more enemies or healing more?
Depends on the situation and the slots you have left, I guess.
Exactly. Spell slots are finite resources, though. Are there ways to cast spells without using up these precious slots?
Yeah, you mentioned cantrips are free.
Yes, the rulebook lists a few methods. First, as we've touched on cantrips, level 0 spells, explicitly stated to be cast without expending a spell slot at all. They are your unlimited magical options.
Unlimited magic, well, for your cantrips at least, that's pretty foundational.
For cantrips, yes. They are designed to be repeatable, standard magical effects you can rely on when your slots are gone, or when you just don't want to spend a slot.
Okay. Another method listed is casting spells as rituals.
Correct. Certain spells have the ritual tag in their description. When you cast a spell as a ritual, the core rule is that it takes 10 minutes longer to cast than its normal casting time.
10 minutes is a significant time commitment, definitely not something for the middle of combat.
Exactly. Rituals are generally used when you have downtime, when you're exploring or setting up camp, not under immediate pressure. But the powerful trade-off is that casting a spell as a ritual does not expend a spell slot.
Ah, so you're trading time for resource conservation? Makes sense. Spells like Detect Magic or Identify, maybe Alarm, those often have the ritual tag, right?
Yes, those are common examples found in the spell list that have the ritual tag. If you have the time, using the ritual casting rule saves you a spell slot you can then use for, a fireball later. It's a smart way to manage your magical potential if you have the spell and the time.
Any other ways to cast without slots?
The source mentions specific abilities. Some character abilities, like certain racial traits or class features, think Tiefling casting Hellish Rebuke or monster abilities grant the ability to cast specific spells a limited number of times, often once per day, without expending a spell slot.
Okay, so check your character sheet features.
Always. It's always noted in the description of that specific ability. And the book also briefly mentions magic items again here.
Bright scrolls and wands.
As we touched on earlier, items like spell scrolls or wands can also grant you the ability to cast spells, and often this comes without expending your own personal spell slots. The item itself powers a magic, usually with its own limits, like charges or being a one-time use for a scroll.
Okay, so to summarize casting fundamentals, you use spell slots for leveled spells. Higher level slots can make lower level spells more powerful, upcasting. And you can cast without slots via your always available cantrips by taking extra time for rituals or through specific abilities and magic items. That covers the resource management side.
That's the core engine of spellcasting laid out by the rulebook. Now let's dive deeper into what all the specific lines in a spell description mean and how they dictate the spell's effects and requirements.
We've covered spell level and spell slots. What's the next standard entry we'd see?
The rulebook lists School of Magic. Every spell belongs to one of 8 schools of magic.
Right, like evocation or illusion.
Exactly. These schools are primarily a way to categorize spells based on their typical effects and flavor. It helps organize the hundreds of spells.
The source lists the 8 schools and a brief description of what they usually entail. Let's run through them quickly. First, abjuration.
Abjuration magic is typically protective. It's about preventing or reversing harmful effects, creating barriers, or dispelling other magic. Think shield, counterspell, protection from evil and good.
Okay, protection, conjuration.
This school focuses on transporting creatures or objects, or creating things seemingly out of nothing. Summoning spells like conjure animals, utility like mage hand, even teleportation like misty step often fall here.
Transportation and creation, divination.
Divination magic is all about revealing information, perceiving things hidden from the senses, maybe getting glimpses of the future. Detect magic, see invisibility, locate object are prime examples. Seeing the unseen.
Information gathering. Enchantment.
This school aims to influence minds. Enchantment spells affect emotions, control creatures, or compel actions. Charm person, suggestion, hold person are classic enchantments, mind control stuff.
Influencing minds. Evocation. This is the flashy one, right?
Often, yeah. Evocation magic is about channeling raw magical energy to create effects, often destructive ones. Fire, cold, lightning, force place. Evocation is the school for direct blasts. Fireball, magic missile, lightning bolt live here.
Arcanes, illusions.
Illusions deceive the mind or senses, creating sights, sounds, smells, and other sensory input that isn't real. Minor illusion, disguise self, major image are key illusion spells, tricking people.
Deception, necromancy. Sounds spooky.
It often deals with life and death. Necromancy spells can drain life force, raise the dead, inflict decay, or even bestow false life. Inflict wounds, animate dead, false life, or necromancy.
Life and death manipulation. And finally, transmutation.
Transmutation magic transforms creatures, objects, or the environment, changing their form or properties, turning red to gold, maybe making things bigger or smaller, growing plants instantly, or giving someone the ability to fly, fall under transmutation. Polymorph and large reduce, fly are examples. Changing things.
Okay, those are the 8 schools. The source material explicitly notes that these schools are listed primarily for descriptive and organizational purposes. They don't impose specific rules on their own.
Right. It's mostly flavor and categorization.
Unless a character ability or another rule specifically interacts with spells of a certain school, like a wizard subclass feature giving a bonus to casting evocation spells or something.
Exactly. Knowing the school helps you understand the flavor and general purpose of a spell, but the actual mechanics are in the other entries we're about to cover.
Gotcha. Next up is class spell lists.
This entry simply indicates which classes typically have access to cast this spell from their own spell list. If a spell appears on a class's list, the class name is listed there. Bard, cleric, wizard, etc.
Sometimes you might see a class name listed in parentheses, though. What's that mean?
Ah, yes, the source explains that. A class name in parentheses indicates that the spell isn't a standard member of that class's list, but it's added to that class's spell list specifically by one of that class's subclasses.
Oh, okay. That's a useful detail. So if you see a spell like, say, Spirit Guardians listed under Paladin, but in parentheses.
Right, that tells you it's not a core Paladin spell available to all Paladins, but it probably comes from a specific Paladino subclass, like maybe the Oath of Devotion or something similar, which adds it to their list.
It helps clarify how certain subclasses expand a caster's normal spell options. Good to know.
Exactly. Okay, now for something critical for using spells in the heat of the moment, casting time.
Right, how long it takes to actually do the magic. The most common casting time, the book says, is 1 action.
Using your action is your main activity on your turn in combat. So casting most spells takes up your primary engagement with the environment or enemies for that turn.
Makes sense. However, some spells require a bonus action.
Yep, faster spells.
Yeah.
But this comes with a crucial rule you absolutely need to remember.
Okay, lay it on me.
If you cast a spell using a bonus action, the rulebook states you are limited in what other spells you can cast during the same turn. You can only cast 1 other spell during that turn, and that other spell must be a cantrip with a casting time of 1 action.
Oh, okay, that's a really important constraint. So let's say I'm a paladin, and I want to cast Banishing Smite, which the source lists with a casting time of 1 bonus action.
Right.
I could cast Banishing Smite as my bonus action, but then for my main action, I couldn't cast a leveled spell like Cure Wounds, which is 1 action.
Right.
But I could cast an action cantrip like Sacred Flame or Toll the Dead, if my class gives me those.
Precisely. It prevents you from, say, using a bonus action spell like Misty Step to teleport, and then immediately unleashing a full-powered action spell like Fireball in the same turn.
It forces a choice, either a bonus action spell and a cantrip, or a full action spell, which could be leveled, or a cantrip. You generally can't sling 2 leveled spells on the same turn using action and bonus action.
Exactly. Good to keep in mind for planning your turn in combat. Some spells also require a reaction.
Like shield or counterspell.
Exactly. A reaction spell is cast in response to a specific trigger event, and it uses up your 1 reaction for the round. Counterspell is the prime example listed, with a casting time of 1 reaction triggered when you see a creature within 60 feet casting a spell.
So they let you do something outside your normal turn sequence.
Right, they allow for responsive magic, often interrupting or altering events initiated by others. Very tactical.
What about spells that take longer than a single action or bonus action, like minutes or hours?
The source details longer casting times. Spells that require 1 minute or even hours to cast. These often, though not exclusively, overlap with spells that have the ritual tag, as we discussed.
Okay.
If a spell requires 1 minute or longer to cast, you must spend your action on each of your turns during that time dedicated to the casting process.
So you're just standing there casting.
Pretty much. And you must maintain concentration for the entire duration of the casting.
Concentration again. That's key. So if you're casting a spell with a 1-minute casting time, that means you'll be using your action for 10 consecutive rounds just casting, and you have to maintain focus the whole time.
Exactly. And if your concentration is broken during that casting time, maybe you take damage and fail the Constitution save, or get knocked out, the spell fails completely.
And you don't expend the spell slot.
Correct. You don't expend the slot if the casting is interrupted, but you have to start over from the beginning if you want to try again.
That makes sense. It's a significant commitment of both time and mental focus, usually for effects that are powerful or long-lasting, like maybe setting up a permanent ward or something.
Right. Okay, next up in the spell description is range. This indicates the maximum distance from you that a spell can reach or originate from. It's usually expressed in feet.
So Acid Splash has a range of 60 feet, meaning you can target creatures up to 60 feet away. Alarm has a range of 30 feet. Pretty simple.
Right. Those are standard distance ranges. Other types of range listed include touch, where the spell requires you to physically touch the creature or object you are targeting.
Like Cure Wounds or Inflict Wounds.
Exactly. Aid is another example listed. You need to be right there, within reach of the target. You're literally putting your hand on them to deliver the magic.
Then there's Self-Range.
This means the spell targets the caster. The description often clarifies if it affects only you or an area around you. Armor of Agathes or Barkskin are listed with a range of self. Self, they affect you directly. Buffs or personal shields often use this.
What about Sight? That sounds powerful.
It can be. If a spell has a range of sight, the target must simply be visible to you. The effective range is limited only by your line of sight, unless the spell description imposes other limitations like a maximum distance.
So potentially miles away if you're on a mountaintop.
Potentially, yeah. Locate creature or locate object are examples of spells that might use this kind of far-reaching range.
And the most extreme is unlimited.
Unlimited range means the spell can reach anywhere, though these spells often come with conditions. Spells like sending or telepathy, which allow communication, have unlimited range but might require the target to be on the same plane of existence and for you to be familiar with them. Can't just send to anyone anywhere.
Gotcha. Conditions apply. The book makes a note that if a spell creates an effect that can move after casting, like a summoned creature or a flaming sphere.
Right, things that stick around and might move.
The subsequent movement of that effect isn't restricted by the spell's initial range unless the description says otherwise.
That's important. The range is where you cast it, or where it starts, not necessarily where its effects are limited to forever. A summoned wolf can run off beyond the initial casting range.
Makes sense. All right, now for components. This section lists the physical requirements you need to fulfill to cast the spell. And the critical rule is, if you cannot provide one or more of a spell's components, you simply cannot cast that spell.
Yep, no components, no magic. There are 3 types: verbal, somatic, and material. V, S, and M.
Let's break them down. Verbal V.
Verbal components require the chanting of specific, often esoteric words or sounds. This means you need to be able to speak clearly. You cannot cast a spell with a verbal component if you are gagged or maybe magically silenced by the silence spell.
Okay, gotta be able to talk. Straightforward enough. Somatic S.
Somatic components involve forceful gestures or intricate hand movements, waggling your fingers, drawing symbols in the air.
The classic wizard hand gestures.
Exactly. To perform these, you need at least one hand free. If both of your hands are full, maybe holding a two-handed weapon, or a sword and shield without the warcaster feat, or grappling a monster, you cannot cast a spell that requires somatic components.
So a spellcaster needs to be mindful of what they're holding or doing with their hands if their spells need that S component.
Absolutely. This is why many casters prefer a free hand, or use a staff or a wand as their spellcasting focus, which often doubles for somatic components if needed, sometimes even if holding a shield depending on other rules or feats. And finally, material M.
This is the one that often trips people up. It means the spell requires specific physical objects listed in its description. This is where things get a bit more nuanced, right? And where inventory management can become important.
Yes, the source provides the key distinction regarding material components, and it's really important to grasp. If the material component listed in the spell description does not have a cost specified in gold pieces, GP.
Like a pinch of soot or a twig.
Right, tiny common things. You generally don't need to track those individual items minute to minute. You can use a spellcasting focus like a holy symbol for a cleric, a wand or staff for a wizard, an arcane focus orb, etc., or a component pouch, which is assumed to contain all these minor bits and bobs.
Ah, so the focus or pouch handles the cheap stuff.
Exactly. It acts in place of material components that don't have a listed cost. It's a convenience feature. Instead of needing to pull out a bit of fur and a crystal rod for lightning bolt, or a pinch of soot and salt for comprehend languages, you just present your focus or gesture with your component pouch hand.
Okay, that simplifies things a lot for most spells.
It does. However, and this is the critical distinction, if the material component description does list a cost in gold pieces.
Like a diamond worth 100 GP.
Exactly. You must have that specific material component. It has to be worth at least that much. And it is typically consumed by the spell, unless the description explicitly says otherwise. These costly components cannot be replaced by a spellcasting focus or component pouch.
Okay, this is where the strategic planning around expensive spells comes in. You have to actually find or buy these costly items, keep them on your character sheet, and track them because they might get used up.
Precisely. Let's look at a few key examples from the source that highlight this rule, because the list of components in the source is huge GE, like pages long, but the principle is what matters.
Good idea. Give me a big one.
Okay, take Revivify. It's a level 3 spell, super crucial for bringing allies back from the brink of death shortly after they fall. Its material component is listed as a diamond worth 300 plus GP, which the spell consumes.
Consumes, that's the key word there, along with the cost.
Right. That diamond requirement is vital. You absolutely need a diamond of at least that value in your possession to cast Revivify, and poof, it's used up when you cast the spell. You can't just wave your holy symbol and bring someone back from 0 hit points and dying. You need the specific, costly, consumed component.
It's a deliberate design choice, then. It makes immediate resurrection possible, but with a significant economic cost, preventing it from being, trivially spammed every fight.
Exactly. And higher-level resurrection spells have even higher costs. Raise Dead needs a 500 GP diamond, also consumed. True Resurrection. The book lists its component as a diamond worth 25,000 plus GP, which the spell consumes.
Wow, 25,000 gold. That's not just pocket change. That's like a major quest reward in itself just to get the component.
Indeed. It reinforces the gravity and rarity of true resurrection. Another common example is identify. It needs a pearl worth 100 plus GP. Now, the text for identify doesn't explicitly say the pearl is consumed.
Ah, so you just need a pearl of that value, but you keep it.
That's how it's generally played, based on the text saying consumed when it means it. So you need the pearl, but you can reuse it. But you still need it. Your focus doesn't cover it because it has a cost. Contrast that with Find Familiar. Low-level spell, level 1. Its material component is burning incense worth 10 plus GP, which the spell consumes.
Okay, so even for a level 1 spell, if you want that familiar, you need to spend that 10 gold on incense that burns away each time you cast the ritual.
Right. It's a small cost, but it's specific and consumed. Then you have truly high costs for world-bending stuff, like Gate needing a diamond worth 5,000 plus GP, which the spell consumes.
These costly components, especially the consumed ones, become resources you have to manage just like spell slots, maybe even more carefully because they cost actual gold.
Absolutely. Do you use that 300 GP diamond for Revivify now, or save it in case the really important NPC goes down later? You spend your hard-earned treasure on that 5,000 GP diamond for Date, knowing it's probably a one-shot deal?
Big decisions. And on the other end, you have spells with weird, specific material components that have no cost listed, like Hypnotic Pattern needing a pinch of confetti, or Grease needing a bit of pork rind or butter.
For all of those, your component pouch or spellcasting focus works perfectly. You don't need to track individual pork rinds.
Thank goodness. Now, the source also listed some particularly unique components in that giant list.
Yes, it did.
Like, Ice Storm having a kitten listed as an M component. Did I read that right from the provided text?
Yes, it appears that specific text was listed in the source material we were given for Ice Storm's components. V, S, M, a kitten.
Huh. Okay. Well, sticking only to the source text provided, that's certainly memorable. It highlights that material components can be quite varied and sometimes unexpected.
Indeed. It certainly makes you wonder about the arcane logistics involved sometimes. But focusing on the core rule, the key takeaway on material components is understanding the difference between those with a listed cost, needed specifically, often consumed, not replaced by focus, and those without, covered by focus pouch. This impacts inventory, gold, and planning.
Got it. Super important distinction. Okay, we've covered gaining spells, preparing them, the resources like slots and components, and how to read the basic parts of a spell description. Now, how do you actually apply a spell in the world? Targeting creatures, objects, areas.
The first foundational rule when trying to affect a target with a spell is that you must have a clear path to the target.
Meaning line of effect, basically, not just line of sight.
Essentially, yes. The rule states that a spellcaster must have a clear, unobstructed path to the target of the spell. Crucially, the source specifically calls out that total cover blocks the spell.
So you can't just cast Charm Person on the guard through the solid stone wall he's standing behind.
Correct. Or through a wall of force, typically. The magical energy needs an unobstructed route from you to the target point or target creature object.
Unless the spell says otherwise, like maybe an area effect that spreads around corners?
Exactly. Some spells, like a sphere originating from a point you can see, might fill an area that includes spaces behind partial cover relative to you, but the origin point itself needs that clear path. Full cover is the main obstacle.
Okay. Speaking of targets, how does targeting specifically work? Who can you hit?
Spells usually target creatures, objects, or areas, as specified in the description. Pretty straightforward. If a spell description says it targets a creature, you can always choose yourself as that creature target if you want to, like casting haste on yourself.
Makes sense.
However, some spells include caveats. They might specify that they must target only hostile creatures, or specifically a creature other than yourself.
So you need to read that fine print in the spell description to know exactly who or what is a valid target for that particular spell. Can't just blast anything with any spell.
Precisely. Many spells, especially those dealing damage or creating environmental effects, cover areas of effect or AoEs.
Right, like Fireball Sphere.
Exactly. The source provides standard shapes for these areas, which typically originate from point you choose within the spell's range unless stated otherwise. The book usually has diagrams.
Yeah, it lists cone, cube, cylinder, emanation, sphere, and line. Common geometric shapes.
Yes, these shapes define the space the spell's effect occupies. Understanding these shapes is crucial for tactical positioning in combat.
Definitely. A cone hits a spread in front of you. A sphere hits everything in a radius around a point. A line zaps targets in a row.
Exactly. The spell description defines which shape is used and its specific size, like a 20-foot radius sphere for fireball or a 60-foot cone for cone of cold.
How do you know if someone is aware they've been targeted by a spell? Is it always like, bam, magic happens?
Not always. The rulebook clarifies that unless a spell has a perceivable effect, something obvious like a bright flash of light, a loud crackle of energy, a summoned creature popping into existence, a target does not automatically know they've been targeted by a spell.
Ooh, sneaky.
Right. Subtle effects like attempts to read their mind with detect thoughts or influence their emotions with a subtle enchantment without visible signs generally don't tip them off unless the spell's description specifically says they become aware, like maybe on a successful save.
That explains why a character might suddenly feel charmed or afraid without knowing why until the effect really manifests. They don't necessarily see the caster waggling fingers from the shadows.
Exactly. It allows for subtle magic. Now, what happens if you try to cast a spell on an invalid target? Like you try to charm a rock.
The source details this. If you cast a spell on something that the spell simply cannot affect, like Charm Person on an inanimate object, or a fire spell on a creature immune to fire damage, the spell fails. And importantly, you still expend the spell slot.
Ouch. So trying to charm a chair is just a waste of a slot in an action.
Yep. But there's an interesting exception mentioned. If the spell normally allows a target a saving throw to resist or reduce the effect.
Like Fireball or Hold Person.
Right. And the target appears to have succeeded on its saving throw. Maybe they were immune, or maybe they just rolled really well. The spell doesn't take effect on them. In this specific case, where a save would normally apply but the target is unaffected, you do not expend the spell slot.
Oh, that's a subtle but potentially very useful nuance. So you might waste your action trying to say, hold a creature immune to paralysis.
Right.
But because Hold Person allows a save, and they were unaffected, due to immunity effectively making the save automatically, you wouldn't lose the spell slot.
That seems to be the implication from the text. And the book adds that the DM typically doesn't tell you why the spell didn't work in that scenario. They don't say, oh, they're immune. They just say the creature shrugs it off or isn't affected.
Interesting. So you might waste your action, but you might not waste a valuable spell slot if you accidentally target something immune or something supernaturally good at saving against that effect, provided the spell had a save in the first place. Allows you to probe defenses without necessarily burning high-level resources if they completely negate it.
Yeah, it's a neat edge case. Many spells mention saving throws. What are these mechanically?
Saving throws are a target's attempt to resist or partially avoid the effects of a spell. It represents dodging, willpower, fortitude, etc. The spell description specifies which ability score the target must use for the saving throw, often dexterity to dodge an area effect like Fireball.
Right, duck and cover.
Wisdom to resist mental influence like Charm Person or fear effects.
Mental fortitude.
Or Constitution to shrug off poisons, diseases, or effects that tax the body, like maybe Ray of Enfeeblement.
Physical resilience. And how does the target know what number they need to roll on their d20 to succeed?
That's determined by the spellcaster's spell save DC. DC stands for difficulty class. The target needs to roll a d20, add their relevant ability modifier, and any proficiency in that save or other bonuses, and try to meet or beat the caster's DC number.
And the calculation for your spell save DC is always the same formula.
Yep, standard formula. 8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier plus your proficiency bonus.
So the higher your primary spellcasting stat, intelligence for wizards, wisdom for clerics, druids, charisma for bards, sorcerers, warlocks, paladins, and the higher your character's overall proficiency bonus, which goes up with level, the harder it is for targets to resist your spells. Your DC gets higher.
Exactly. It's a core statistic for spellcasters, representing how potent their magic is. Now, some spells, instead of requiring the target to make a saving throw, require the spellcaster to make an attack roll.
Right, like trying to hit someone with a beam or a magical touch. Think Firebolt or Ray of Frost or even Shocking Grasp.
Yes. These spells require you to roll a d20 and add your spell attack modifier to see if the spell hits the target's armor class, AC, just like a weapon attack.
And the calculation for your spell attack modifier is also standard.
Also standard. Your spellcasting ability modifier plus your proficiency bonus.
Okay, so it's the same structure as weapon attack rolls, ability mod plus proficiency, but using your spellcasting ability instead of strength or dexterity and applying to a spell attack rather than a weapon attack.
Correct. The source even lists examples like Acid Splash as a ranged spell attack cantrip and Thorn Whip as a melee spell attack cantrip, showing that spell attacks can be up close too, using your spellcasting ability for the attack roll. You need to hit the target's AC with your roll for the spell to have its primary effect.
So, two main ways spells interact with targets. They either force a save or you make an attack roll. Got it.
Pretty much. Now, what happens if you have multiple magical effects going on at once, like two different buffs on the same target, or maybe the same spell cast by two different casters on one poor goblin?
Good question. How does magic stack?
The general rule for combining spell effects is straightforward. The effects of different spells add together while the durations overlap. If one spell gives you a +1 bonus to attack rolls, and a different spell gives you advantage on attack rolls, you gain both benefits.
Okay, so different spells stack their benefits. That's good. But what about the same spell? Can two clerics both cast Bless on me for double the bonus?
No. The exception is explicit in the rules. The effects of the same spell cast multiple times don't combine. Instead, only the strongest effect applies while their durations overlap.
Only the strongest.
Yes. The rulebook provides that clear example. Two clerics casting Bless on the same target. Bless gives creatures a bonus d4 to attack rolls and saving throws.
Right.
If two clerics cast Bless on the same creature, that creature doesn't get to add 2d4. They only gain the benefit of one casting of Bless. If one cleric somehow cast it in a way that made it more potent, maybe a higher level version, though Bless doesn't inherently scale that way, it's just for illustration, the stronger version would apply.
And the duration?
The duration of the effect continues as long as at least one of the spellcastings remains active on that target. So if Cleric A's Bless runs out but Cleric B's is still going, the target keeps the benefit from Cleric B's casting. But you never get the same effect twice simultaneously from the same spell source.
Got it. Different spells layer and combine, but the same spell only applies its best version once to a target, even if cast multiple times by different people. Prevents crazy stacking abuse.
Exactly. Finally, in this section, the rulebook addresses identifying an ongoing spell.
Right. If you see some weird magical glow on someone, or maybe objects floating mysteriously, how do you figure out what spell is causing it?
The source says you can try to identify a non-instantaneous spell, so one with a duration, by its observable effects. This requires you to use your action on your turn.
Okay, costs an action.
And you must succeed on a DC 15 Intelligence Arcana check.
DC 15 Arcana check. So you have to spend your turn focusing, using your knowledge of magic, to try and recognize the spell based on what you see or hear or sense.
Precisely. Assuming you have the action available, and either proficiency in Arcana or just a decent intelligence score to make the check feasible, it's not automatic.
Okay, cool. So we've covered all the core mechanics from the Rulebook's Chapter 7, Spells Introduction and Rules section. The chapter itself then goes into, like you said, a massive alphabetical list of hundreds of spells, covering every spell level from 0 cantrips all the way up to the mighty 9th level spells.
It's a huge compendium,
Yeah.
detailing the full breadth of magical possibilities available to characters. We can't possibly go through every spell listed in the source.
No way, we'd be here for days.
Right. But we've touched on several examples from the source material throughout this deep dive to illustrate the rules we've discussed. Maybe we can quickly revisit some of those.
Good idea. Just to reinforce how the mechanics we've broken down apply to specific spells you might actually use or encounter.
Sounds good. We spent time on Acid Splash. It's a perfect example of a cantrip. Level 0, no slot needed. It requires a ranged spell attack, using your spell attack modifier. It has a defined range, 60 feet. It can affect an area of effect, 5-foot radius sphere, mentioned in cone context earlier. Need to check exact 2024 wording perhaps, but AoE is key. And it allows a target a dexterity saving throw, using their dex save versus your spell save DC for half damage.
And cantrips scale automatically with character level, right? The damage goes up at certain tiers.
Exactly. Its description includes that standard cantrip damage scaling note. It really hits on many core concepts: cantrip, attack roll, range, AoE, save, scaling.
And Cure Wounds, a classic level 1 healing spell. Its range is touch, showing that mechanic. Casting time on action, components V and S. And this description clearly shows how its healing effect increases when you upcast it using a higher level spell slot.
Perfect example of upcasting for more healing. Alarm, another level 1 spell, is great for illustrating longer casting times, 1 minute, and the ritual tag, highlighting the benefit of casting it over 11 minutes total, 1 min plus 10-minute ritual time to save a spell slot.
Right, save that slot for later.
It also has a set duration, 8 hours, And specific components, VS, M, Tiny Bell, and Silver Wire, crucially, no cost listed, so your focus pouch covers the M.
Magic Missile, a staple level 1 spell, range 120 feet. Casting time 1 action. Duration instantaneous it happens, darts fly, effect is over. Components are V and S. What makes the spell unique and why it's so reliable is its effect. It automatically hits. No attack roll, no saving throw.
It just works, unless the target has shield spell or something specific.
Right. It bypasses typical defenses in a unique way, and its higher level casting effect adds more missiles, showing simple, reliable damage scaling.
Then Fireball, the iconic level 3 evocation spell. Range 150 feet. Casting time 1 action. Duration instantaneous. Components V, S, M. That ball of back guano and sulfur, but again, no cost listed, so replaceable by a focus pouch. It affects a large area of effect, 20-foot radius sphere.
Big boom.
Requires a dexterity saving throw for half damage, and its description shows significant damage scaling when using higher level slots. It's a great example of a powerful, straightforward damage spell with a big area, a common save, dex, and good upcasting potential.
We also discussed concentration spells, which require the caster to maintain focus. Spells like Hold Person, Bless, Fly, Haste. Many powerful buffs and control spells fall into this category.
Right. The description will say concentration up to X, listing a maximum duration like 1 minute, 10 minutes, an hour. Calm Emotions was another example listed in the source, concentration up to 1 minute.
And maintaining concentration, as you said, requires a conscious effort, and it can be broken. The most common way is by taking damage, right?
Yes. If you take damage while concentrating on a spell, you must make a Constitution saving throw. The DC for this save is 10, or half the damage you took, whichever number is higher.
So if you take a big hit, the DC gets harder.
Exactly. And if you fail this Constitution save, your concentration breaks, and the spell immediately ends prematurely. Kaput.
That's such a critical point. It means casting a concentration spell isn't just about spending the slot. It's an ongoing commitment that makes you vulnerable. Enemies should try to hit the caster, concentrating on that nasty Hold Person or powerful haste.
Absolutely. It adds a layer of strategic risk and reward to many potent spells. Choosing a concentration spell means you're often choosing a powerful effect, but you're willing to put yourself at risk to maintain it. Makes you think about positioning and maybe defensive options.
Definitely adds tactical depth. And of course, the list goes all the way up to level 9 spells like Wish or Time Stop, as mentioned in the source. These illustrate the absolute peak of magical power.
Reality warping stuff.
Offering effects that can reshape reality or manipulate time itself, often coming with unique component requirements, potential risks, or narrative weight as detailed in their individual descriptions.
From the simple utility of a cantrip like Mage Hand, to the earth-shattering power of a 9th-level spell like Meteor Swarm, the framework of rules we've discussed today, levels, slots, components, casting times, targeting, concentration, applies across this entire spectrum.
Okay, let's try and put it all together then. Why does understanding all of these specific rules from Chapter 7 matter for you, the listener? Whether you're a seasoned player just starting out or even a dungeon master trying to run magic smoothly.
Well, knowing these rules isn't just about, passing a rules quiz. It's fundamental to playing a spellcasting character effectively and understanding the magical world around you in the game.
Right, it's not just fluff.
Not at all. It tells you exactly what your character is capable of doing in any given situation, what spells you can cast, when you can cast them, what they require. It also helps you anticipate and react to magic used against you by your enemies.
Understanding components, for example, like we hammered home, it means knowing whether you need to track that expensive 300 GP diamond for Revivify, or if your holy symbol is enough for Cure Wounds. It influences your shopping list, your inventory choices.
And even how you roleplay casting a spell. Are you chanting loudly? Verbal? Making complex gestures? Somatic? Sprinkling dust? Material? Knowing the components adds flavor.
Good point. And knowing ranges and areas of effect is critical for combat positioning. Do I need to run up to my ally for a touch spell, or can I stay safely back 60 feet for Acid Splash? Where do I drop that fireball sphere to hit the most goblins, but crucially, avoid insulating the party's rogue?
These rules directly inform your movement and tactical decisions on the battle map, turn by turn. Understanding the difference between forcing a spell save versus making a spell attack roll helps you choose the right spell for the right target.
Yeah, like, is this big brute likely to have high AC but maybe a weak wisdom save? Then maybe Hold Monster or Command is a better choice than trying to hit it with Ray of Frost. Is it a nimble enemy with great dex saves but maybe lower AC? go for the spell attack.
Exactly. And knowing that crucial bonus action spell rule prevents you from planning an impossible turn, like trying to cast both Misty Step and Fireball at the same time, it forces you to make a meaningful strategic choice about which magical effect is more important right now.
And understanding concentration means knowing the risk you take when casting a spell like Bless or Hold Person. Recognizing that taking damage might break its effect makes you consider defensive positioning, maybe asking the fighter to stand in front of you.
Or using cover, or casting defensive spells on yourself first. It really empowers you, the player, to make informed strategic decisions. It takes you from just rolling dice and shouting spell names to truly engaging with the mechanics and making meaningful choices about your character's capabilities and limitations.
It feels more involved, more tactical.
Absolutely. And while Chapter 7 and the spell list itself is vast and can seem intimidating, now that you understand the structure and the core mechanics components, casting time, range, saves, attacks, concentration, etc., you'll find that looking up specific spells is much easier. You know exactly what each entry means and how it impacts gameplay.
It's like having the key to decode the spell descriptions. It's a journey of discovery through the rules. And speaking of journeys, we've covered a lot of ground today, pulling information straight from Chapter 7, spells in the updated 2024 D&D rulebook.
We really have. We navigated the fundamentals of gaining and preparing spells, delved into the core mechanics of casting using slots and components, broken down every standard entry you'll find in a spell description, and explored how spells are applied through targeting, areas, saves, attacks, and how they interact.
We pulled all this information directly from the updated rulebook text provided, just for you, the listener, hoping to provide a clear and comprehensive understanding of these essential D&D spellcasting rules.
Hopefully this deep dive provides a solid foundation for your own magical explorations in your D&D games.
Before we wrap up, here's a little something to chew on, a thought to leave you with. Considering the sheer variety and power described in this chapter, from cantrips to 9th level spells, how does the structure of spell slots and, especially, the different preparation rules for each class, how does that shape the strategic choices spellcasters make before an adventuring day even begins?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's not just about the split-second decisions in combat, is it? It's about the crucial planning that happens during that long rest. What spells do you anticipate needing? How does your class's flexibility, or lack thereof, impact those choices?
A critical question for any spellcaster player or DM designing encounters to ponder as they prepare their magical toolkit for the challenges ahead. What's on your list today?
Something to think about.
And to our fantastic viewers over on the Dragons and Disasters YouTube channel, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into D&D spellcasting.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
If you found this deep dive helpful or maybe just fascinating, please make sure to like this video. It really helps us out a lot. And maybe follow or subscribe to Dragons and Disasters for more explorations into the world of D&D rules.
We look forward to continuing our deep dives with you. Lots more rules to explore.
Definitely. See you next time.